when I do my combined holding, I definitely got a good bunch of shares at about a buck 20, and then I got a whole pile of them at $3.
So
And
so
even I
you
bought
had
again and
you bought at
yeah.
120.
Yeah. So that was
So
22 years ago now. I don't have the stats in front of me, and anyone with Yahoo Finance will go, hold on, 22 years ago it was only 150. I don't have it exactly. So, but oh yeah, my combined price is single digits.
yeah,
They'll definitely,
but
like, lower than $5.
for the sake of some like sensationalist journalism that we're prone to,
Yeah.
so if you bought shares at 120 a pop and Netflix went up $128 between last night and this morning, you had a 100 bagger overnight. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
This episode of the pod is proudly sponsored by Cadiz Inc. It trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker CDZI. Cadiz is a transformative water resource company that is making a significant impact with its $5 billion in water assets and $173 million in cash. The company is currently constructing a massive water pipeline, the largest in the southwest, which is designed to ensure reliable water access for the region. Cadiz is actively combating the water crisis with game-changing infrastructure projects and strategic partnerships. Under the leadership of visionary CEO Susan Kennedy, who previously served as Chief of Staff to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cadiz is set to provide innovative solutions and substantial value to both its shareholders and the communities it serves. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. The information provided here is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Emmet, how are we getting on?
How are you doing, Mike?
I'm good. Tipping away now. Good. Jesus, I'm going to start the show. We're going to talk about Netflix, but I want to ask a slightly personal question first. So I was doing the maths. Netflix is up about 15% in the after hours after last night's earnings report. So
Yeah, and we're recording on the morning of Wednesday,
we're
22nd of
we're
January.
recording Wednesday
So
morning. This will come out Thursday morning, but that's about 128 bucks. The difference, say it closed last
yeah.
night at 870 and is up to 998 today. On your original Netflix investment, what's the how much would you be up on that alone
Um,
from last night?
do you know the founder of the Motley Fool is a guy called David Gardner? He's an absolutely amazing investor, an inspiration, and I think will go down in the annals of history as one of the greatest stock investors of all time. And I was talking to David earlier this week, actually on Monday, and then again on Tuesday, and it was he who coined a phrase that's very him called spiffy pop, which is a word used to describe when a stock moves up in a day more than you originally paid for it. So whether
Yeah,
you look at a stock at a per share price level or total investment, so if you invested $1,000 in a specific company and then it moved up more than $1,000 a few years later, that's a spiffy pop. Or if
yeah,
indeed you bought
exactly.
exactly,
So if Netflix was at 128 when you bought it, you had a spiffy. You'll
yes,
open up
exactly.
today.
Well, when I do my combined holding, I definitely got a good bunch of shares at about a buck 20, and then I got a whole pile of them at $3.
So
And
so
even I
you
bought
had
again and
you bought at
yeah.
120.
Yeah. So that was
So
22 years ago now. I don't have the stats in front of me, and anyone with Yahoo Finance will go, hold on, 22 years ago it was only 150. I don't have it exactly. So, but oh yeah, my combined price is single digits.
yeah,
They'll definitely,
but
like, lower than $5.
for the sake of some like sensationalist journalism that we're prone to,
Yeah.
so if you bought shares at 120 a pop and Netflix went up $128 between last night and this morning, you had a 100 bagger overnight. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Now my combined position. Now, firstly, this is again, I usually put a spotlight on Netflix because it is the best investment I made, and I've made thousands of investments, thousands and thousands, and I can say at least half of those didn't work out. But the ones that work out, absolutely, just mind-bogglingly compensate you for the ones that didn't work out. And that's really what I'm always on about in Horizon. I'm not going to spin this into a sign up for Horizon message. And like, even when we launched Horizon of December 2019, which is effectively 5 years ago, there has been a lot of bad choices, but I'm convinced, I know I have a 100 bagger in there. I'm just going to have to wait 20 years to get there. But yeah, it's a great feeling. It's amazing. And I was watching actually Netflix with uh, my wife last night. I said, "Oh, Netflix is reporting now. I just want to pop in there and see how it's going." And, you get to a point where you've actually observed 10 reporting cycles, 20 reporting cycles. And if you own a share for 25 years, uh, you've gone through 100 reporting cycles. Now, I haven't owned Netflix for for 25 years, but I have owned it for quite a while, 22 or something years. And you eventually just get used to the cadence and what you're going to hear. But last night's report knocked my socks off. You can imagine how many I've listened to, but my eyes opened and my mouth fell open. I couldn't believe what they delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the numbers. So I just run you through them real fast here. So revenue was up 16% year over year to 10.2 billion. Net income doubled to 1.9 billion. Operating income was up 52% year over year. The margin went from 17% last year to 22% this year. It added 19 million new subscribers. So it's taken its total subscriber base to 302 million. It's important as well. We've talked about this before, but this is the last quarter it's going to
Yeah.
report on subscriber numbers. That you can take that with a pinch of salt, I suppose, but we won't dwell on it. Free cash flow was down slightly year over year, 1.4 billion. The ad supported plan accounted for 55% of signups where it was available. So it's obviously not available in all its regions, and it's still growing at 30% quarter over quarter. It added 15 billion quid to its share repurchase program, and it upped its full year guidance for 2025. So it's now expecting revenue to grow between 12 and 14% and an operating margin for the whole year of 29%. Just financials alone, it's unbelievable what this business is continuing to deliver since when was the
Yeah.
low point, which is I think around when you bought it for Horizon as well.
Yeah, yeah, we're up about, I think about fourfold in Horizon on the Netflix purchase, which only feels like it was about a year and a half or 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think
But
it hit it like it hit it in a year at about 2022, I think, wasn't it?
mm, you brushed over a lot of numbers there, and it's difficult, I'm sure, when you're just listening to a podcast to hear and absorb numbers. But one of the ones you said, just one, net income doubled. It doubled. This business has been around for 20 something years, and they're just like that. They doubled their net income to almost $2 billion. Now, to think of a business, I read an article, I think it was in the HBO a few years ago, and it was entitled Can Elephants Sprint? And the title I think was quite clever, hence remembering it. Don't remember a whole lot more about the article, but it was really to say these giant businesses that we see in the world today. At the time, was about the FANG stocks, of which Netflix is one. Can they sprint? Well, last night it sprinted. These giant businesses are actually doubling their net income in a tiny period. It is just unreal. Are increasing their revenue 16% year over year. They're small businesses that would just, do anything to increase their revenue by 16% in a year. So, like the numbers you gave there are just absolutely, as I said, they're face melting. I mean, they had $4.27 earnings per share, which it's another way of saying what you just said, is kind of doubling from the same time in 2023. It was just so amazing. Other things they said about the actual usage of it. Squid Game 2 is tracking to become one of the most watched original series ever. Have you watched it?
I watched Squid Game 1. I haven't gotten into Squid Game 2 yet. I'm not
Mm.
that enticed by it either, but
Yeah, I was take it or leave it. I actually watched the last episode of season two, which is most people go, "How could you? That's terrible." But I did. I just walked into the room and it was on. I sat down and watched it. And then I saw this show Carry On joined its top all
oh,
time.
the Christmas movie. Yeah, they tried to
Uh,
basically make
when
a Die Hard movie, I think, essentially.
I see, I was wondering, oh, is that the Carry On Laughing franchise?
Yeah,
How on earth
that's
did
what I
that get
thought
made?
as well. Carry on abroad or whatever it is.
Who
No,
are matron? Like I was like, come on, really? It's in the
yeah,
top 10, you know. And then there was the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, became the most streamed sporting event ever. Can you believe that?
yeah. So this must be its own. Uh, I read that on the earnings report, and it stuck out to me. I think this must be its own kind of separate distinction. Like it's not the most. the difference between, say, a streaming event and a pay-per-view event. And so
Yeah, no, I think streaming
streaming
is,
sports
yeah.
events are relatively new, so hence why.
Yeah, no, that is true. It certainly wouldn't have been the greatest sporting moment of all time. That's a
No, it
different.
would be a sad list if that was on the top.
And the
55-year-old
most
Mike
streamed
Tyson.
NFL, and the most streamed NFL games in history on Christmas Day.
Yeah. So again, this is obviously not the most watched NFL games, but in this own separate distinction. But again, like
Mm,
NFL games have been streaming very consistently on YouTube TV, on Amazon Prime for the last 2 or 3 years. So it does stand out that Netflix, in its first foray into that, has kind of taken the top spot. Obviously, they have a special platform in the fact that they were going out on Christmas Day, but yeah, it goes a long way. And I think the the foray into live sports, and I wrote recently about it, the WWE deal, where with WWE, I suppose it's its own separate thing, but it is still live sports, and to a lot of people, there's a built-in fan base there. And what
mm.
Netflix has done is kind of thought a bit outside the box of, okay, NFL rights, NBA rights cost a flipping fortune, and it's just, we're going to spend so much on getting kind of exclusive rights to X or Y that it's not going to really provide that much ROI. But if we look at something like WWE that has a weekly show, built-in fans, but also we can help grow the WWE, while the WWE provides a very important kind of live aspect or weekly aspect to Netflix as well. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. So it's interesting. They're not going about it in the same way as others when it comes to live sports. They're not just throwing
Mm.
money at the problem. And Ted Sarandos has said this before, like the NFL in particular is too expensive. But we'll figure out a way to do something. So like the Christmas Day games is a way of that. So yeah, it's interesting. I like their strategy so far.
So do I. I mean, they very much use data cleverly, and they don't seem to rush decisions. Where other players would actually just decide they're doing something and go and do it. You can see Netflix takes very considered decisions. Like, for example, they said they were going to ratchet the price up in the US, Canada, Portugal, and Argentina in the next couple of weeks, which are a
Yeah.
lot of people. And they didn't say to what price, but
I
you
think
can infer.
it's
Oh, sorry.
250 on the basic plan, and then the ad supported plan is going up by $1.
Oh, so they did say that.
Yeah.
Ah, I didn't know that. Well, they know already their price elasticity curve. They know how many people they'll lose, and they'll know how many people will just stick around. And clearly, the mathematics of that works out. Um, you can say, you just without knowing, you can just imagine most people just shrug their shoulders. Like price
Yeah.
sensitivity for a book or two doesn't really kick in. But what it allowed them to do with a high degree of certainty was restate the overall guidance for the year ahead, and they now expect revenue of between 43.5 and 44.5 billion dollars for 2025, which represents about 12 to 14% year over year growth and an operating margin of 30%. For a company that involves itself in purchasing content non-stop, and that's core to their business, or producing content, depending whether it's in-house, like to have a 29% operating margin is just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. And what's interesting as well, so we mentioned this is the last quarter of them posting subscriber numbers. So they're not beholden to that stat anymore. I'd say they're much more comfortable with upping the price now because, if you have 300 million subscribers paying $15, you can get 280 million that are paying $18, and it's going to be worth more to you. Do you know what I mean? Like they're very
Mm,
much happy with that setup now. Whereas if we saw in Q1 that subscriber numbers fell, the stock would go haywire, and that's just
yeah.
not a risk anymore. So they can kind of concentrate a bit more on unit economics instead of one big North Star figure. And I think that's where the shift away from it came from. Is just investors are only focusing on one figure when maybe in terms of the business's performance that's not the most important, or is it even holding us back in terms of our unit economics? So it's an interesting
Mm,
one. But yeah,
it
that was
is. Yeah.
Netflix. Do you have anything closing out, bar the fact that you had a overnight 100 bagger?
No, oh no, I didn't have an over. No, my combined position, no way. But it was, it was a good night. Have to, but the market always overreacts after hours, whether it's good or bad news. You'll see your stocks plummet or soar, and then when the market opens properly the next day, you kind of get a more sober read on the overall voting public's view of the report. So, yeah, look, as I said, I care because I've recommended it for Horizon and I'm a shareholder in the business. But I wouldn't have lost any sleep if it was a bad quarter, and I wouldn't have felt any more exuberant if it was even double what it was last night. I mean, I'm delighted, but it's just, as I said, I've held this stock for 20 something years and I plan to hold it for another 20 something years. That's how good a business it is.
Okay, brilliant. So you've got a piece done up on capital gains tax, which I'm interested to hear.
Oh,
But no,
yeah.
I actually
Well,
am. It's true. It's
yeah.
going to be for long term stock investors. It could be the number one expense you go through. But
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is.
before before we get into it, I just want to do a quick piece. So, I mean, I don't know where to start with the last week in U.S. politics, so I'm kind of going to try to avoid most of it. With the inauguration and everything that's happening and flipping whatever Elon Musk is doing, let's just put that all to one side. But there is one, say, purely financial element that's come out of it, which is the meme coin stuff. Have you seen this with Trump coin and
I
Melania
have,
coin?
yeah, I've seen it. I disappeared down a rabbit hole and jumped out very quickly because I don't understand it. Well, I think what I understand, I think is ridiculous. But tell me what's
Yeah.
going on.
So look, I'm not going to dwell on it. I think we've kind of drawn our line in the sand here. We talk about stocks. We don't really talk about crypto, but something like this, I don't know if we can ignore it. Do you know what I mean? So it just, I don't know. Like, at what stage of like late stage capitalism are we at? Late stage capitalism are we at when the incoming president of the United States launches his own crypto token 3 days before his inauguration? So yeah, basically that's it. He launched what they're calling a meme coin, essentially. It's essentially just a speculative asset you can bet and gamble on. So it said in the kind of fine print, the coins which launched. So Trump coin launched on Friday, then Melania coin launched on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the coins are an expression of support for and engagement with the ideals and beliefs embodied by the symbol Trump, and not an investment or security.
Yeah.
Now, 80% of the coins like are owned by affiliates of Trump's businesses. So I think what it means by expression of support is basically lining his pockets. And I don't know, I'm not going to make a big grandstand thing here, but I just want, like, you can get a bit disillusioned when you see someone making, some fella made turned £1 million on Friday into 300 million quid by Sunday, and
Mm.
they sold the second the coin got listed on Robinhood. And I think that's indicative of a wider problem, is that the second it kind of becomes available to the masses, we'll say, is when the insiders got out, or where one particular insider got out. And this is the thing, is that these meme coins and these really hot cryptocurrencies, they're just speculative gambling devices, essentially. Don't
What were those things called again? The ape. I can't even
the
remember. It's not
NFTs. NFTs is the exact same thing.
NFTs. Oh, like the one thing is Donald Trump is the face of capitalism. He is the president of the United States of America, which is the country that stands for capitalism and is built on capitalism. So, what is ostensibly the most capitalist person out there is now in charge of the most capitalist country in the world, and as a consequence, we see what you've just described. I didn't know his wife had released one. And I think if they clearly label, look, this is not a financial instrument, it sounds a bit like the Bored Ape thing, and it's a way of just getting behind your president. So if President Higgins, the president of Ireland, listed a Higgins coin, would you buy one? Like, you can, why not? He's a great lad. I'd buy a Higgins coin.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
What's
just.
President Higgins' wife's name?
Oh, I should know this.
Sabrina.
Sabrina, is it? Yeah.
I think it is. Are they not
Yeah.
neighbours of yours, Mike, back when you're in Ireland? No?
Oh yeah. Well, they live in or snoots around, but yeah, they used to live up in Galway. not too far
Yeah.
away. Galway City, yeah.
Well, my co-founder John, totally we're straying off the path here. My co-founder John Tyrrell, he would have played with the president of Ireland's kids when they were small, which is for American listeners, you're like, what? But in Ireland, everyone goes so hot because Ireland is a very small place, and if you live in the middle of Galway City, there's a good chance your kids are playing with someone else's kids who are famous. But anyway, yeah, I'd buy a Higgins coin, so why not? As
Yeah, but
it's an
that's it.
NFT though, based on what you said. It's not
When
a financial instrument. It's a thing you look at.
it's yeah, it's what they're calling a meme coin now.
Oh, sorry. A
Yeah,
meme coin is an NFT, is it? My goodness, as I
no,
unveil
they're
my ignorance.
well, look, it doesn't really matter which is which, but no,
Mm.
an NFT is a specific image,
Oh,
non-fungible
non-fungible.
token,
Yeah,
and then a meme
yeah.
coin is just meme coin is anything really, just a look. I'm showing my own ignorance because I'm not able to describe it simply, but essentially some
You'd
form
have
of
to see. You'd know it if you saw
yeah.
it.
It's like what's that? When they were trying to ban porn in the US, and someone said, "How do you describe porn?" It's like you'll know when you see it. Um, so yeah, there's not much to add to this. I don't think we're that type of podcast where we're going to have a deep discussion about meme coins and all the rest. But it's just indicative of where the executive branch, I suppose, is on crypto. It's going to be in completely deregulated environment, and this is, I suppose, a show of support. Do you know what I mean? Like, if
Hmm.
you're in the crypto space now, there's going to be so many opportunities for speculation and gambling, and just be fully aware. Like, it is caveat emptor out there, and I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think there will be many repercussions for for any kind of dodgy dealings, essentially. So, yeah, look, that's it. I don't have much
It
more
is
to add.
without us putting the label on it, is the election special, and obviously there was a lot of imagery coming from Capitol Hill or whatever the building was. It's Capitol Hill over the last 24, 48 hours. Some people love what they see, others don't and see and hear. But there was one particular soundbite which I thought was very interesting, and it was Sam Altman made a speech with new President Trump beside him, and it was the vision for AI and AI is integral, I suppose, part of America's future. And the speech from Sam Altman was really interesting because Trump asked him to say a few words about where AI is going and how it's going to cure, uh, I suppose, every disease known. And Sam Altman, I don't have the script or anything like it in front of me, but said something to the effect of AI will cure most illnesses at a pace that nobody could have imagined. And he went and elaborated somewhat on that point. But I would say to our listeners, if that kind of stuff interests you, just look it up on YouTube or TikTok where it's available. But it's available everywhere now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we won't say much more on that, but yeah, let's move on to what you have prepped for capital gains tax. I'm actually perversely interested to hear about this because I think it is a really important
Yeah.
aspect of investing as a whole to be aware of it. Like,
Yeah, for sure. And last week I kind of went off on a rant about the fallacy of deemed disposal on ETFs in Ireland, which I regard as ill-conceived and punitive and immoral. And I made that point when we were chatting. So I thought I'd keep the good vibes flowing and talk a little bit about the concept of capital gains tax, which I also think is unfair, but at least it's unfair everywhere as
yeah,
opposed to an Irish special.
well,
Like
it's more
everyone around the
unfair.
world is not nodding going, I hate that tax, or at least I hope they are. But at least it's unfair everywhere. Almost no matter where you are, it's going to come and bite you. But I'm going to give you the 30-second version or backstory of capital gains tax. And basically, taxing gains on assets and on things you own began to take shape in the United States when the 16th Amendment in 1913 made it possible for the government to tax all forms of income, including investment profits. And then over time, every other country joined the party. So that's the end of the history lesson. And you can kind of see if you're running government, you look over in the hill and those rich guys over there are building wealth and having a party, and the government is trying to make and form and run a country. And you can see why CGT is a thing. And there's alternatives to how it could be done, but they aren't done. So it's not. I'm not here to pontificate about other ways to do CGT. And I usually piss and moan about the fact that I paid income tax on every penny I ever invested. only to get taxed again if it worked out. But a more level-headed headed friend of mine pointed out that that's where the lion's share of wealth comes from. So fair enough, whatever. Tax what I earn, tax me on the risks I took if they work out, tax me when my dad leaves what he spent 70 years lawfully gathering, tax everything. But I do acknowledge that running a country is well, it's expensive. And I just, for me, at a piss and moan level, I just lament the lack of cost control seen in governments everywhere. And I won't get on that soapbox. But CGT is there and it's everywhere. So it has permeated more or less every country, but it very significantly differs from country to country. So my understanding, I'm going to talk a little bit about Europe, but I'd like to start by just explaining what's going on in the big English-speaking countries. So my understanding is that in the US, long-term gains, that's stocks or assets that are held for over a year, their CGT ranges from 0 to 20% depending on income. Short term, so 20% for most people. Short term gains are taxed as ordinary income. In Canada, I think they tax half of any of the capital gain at your usual income rate, if you can get your head around that. In Australia, they grant a 50% discount on gains for assets that are held for more than 12 months. And in the UK, individuals generally pay 10 to 20% on share gains, though higher rates, like up to 28%, apply to property. So every country has its own rule book, and it's never plain sailing. Well, sorry, that's not quite true. In some countries, it's plain sailing, but everyone gets an annual tax-free allowance, which in Ireland, to the best of my knowledge, is €1,270.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say right now, Mike, to everyone, please don't make a tax return based on what you hear in this podcast. Just don't. This is not tax advice. This is a chat, like in a pub without the drinks. So I thought it'd be fun to do some kind of weird CGT top of the pops in Europe. And for our listeners' interest, I used a website called taxfoundation.org, and they have a beautiful map of capital gains tax rates throughout Europe in the year at the close of the year in 2024. But as I said, it looks legit. I cross-referenced it, but do not make any tax decisions based on anything you hear on this podcast, folks. Do you hear me right? That's in order. Okay, Mike, let's do a little pop quiz. Are you ready?
Hit me.
Right. First up, can you name 3 countries from wider Europe where CGT is 0? Now, let me tell you what I mean by wider Europe. I have a list here off that website I called out of 35 countries, but I think there's 44 countries and principalities and all kind of that jurisdictional stuff that constitute Europe. But I have a list of 35. I want you to try and name 3 where CGT is zip.
So there's tax havens, I know that. So like Jersey, maybe that doesn't count as its own country, does it?
Jersey is an island, but it must have its own. Would you believe it's not on the list? But I know you're right. But to live in Jersey, I think you need to know somebody and be stinking rich. And in UK
Yeah.
citizen, like there's a list of toll gates, But I'm
Um,
going to give you that one. Why not? Throw it there.
I think is Gibraltar another one.
Gibraltar.
I might even these might even count as countries here.
See, Gibraltar isn't really a country. Again, this is why I said there's a
Well,
whole bunch of jurisdictional stuff in Europe because
was
we
it?
have special
Yeah,
cases.
maybe I'm crossing lines I shouldn't. But if Gibraltar wasn't a country, Ireland would be flipping even worse at soccer because it's the only team we beat in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Norway.
Well, no,
No,
actually, no. You've gone to the absolute extreme other end of the scale.
I thought Norway with the oil money had.
I'm going to allow no. So you've already. So by the way, Norway is second highest, which means in our
Okay,
next little pop quiz, I'm going to hit you
I'm
with
gonna
3 or
bank.
4
I'm gonna
questions.
bank that. So I'm not
Yeah.
doing very well here. Switzerland.
Yes,
Yes. Okay,
Switzerland.
that was the most obvious one. I
Okay,
don't know why I didn't start there.
I'm going to score you 2 out of
Oh no,
3.
let me
Okay,
one more guess.
okay,
One
go
more
on,
guess.
go on.
Liechtenstein.
As I read through the list, no.
Okay.
It is not. But when I read from the bottom up of this list, Belgium, Czech Republic, Georgia, Luxembourg, Malta,
Malta.
Slovakia,
Yeah.
Slovenia, and
These
you
all
should
have
remember this.
These all have no
Zero
CGT.
capital gains, according to our friends who study this stuff. And finally, the one I thought you'd get, Switzerland.
I should have got. Well, I did get Switzerland eventually after 10 throws at the board.
So, hey, listen, if you were going to go live somewhere where there's no CGT, where would you choose? Belgium, Czech Republic, Georgia, Luxembourg, Malta, Slovakia, Slovenia, Switzerland, or Turkey? I didn't
uh,
say Turkey. Sorry, I meant to say that.
See, there's a lot of good elements to each. I could
Mm.
go to Turkey and
Mm.
I'd have a new hairline and whiter
Yeah,
teeth.
lovely.
And
Brighter
that's where
teeth.
I'd spend all the tax savings on.
And a tan. Yeah, because if you went to Switzerland, you'd save the tax and then you could use that to buy one beer and the bus home. Like
Whereas
it's just like,
Czech Republic, you could buy flipping. How they have it's like €1 a pint over there.
yeah, actually,
Um,
by the way, Czech Republic's a great place. I love
yeah,
that spot. So that's a good one.
yeah. I've been to Slovakia before. Oh, I'm gonna expose myself here. I hope I've been to Slovakia before. Where's Bratislava?
I can't hear you. You're breaking up.
Yes, I'm right. I'm right. I'm right. I have
That's what
been.
they say on CNBC when they're hit with a live question. Sorry, you're breaking up there. I didn't hear you.
I've been
What does the
to.
company do? I don't know. I can't hear you.
I've been to Bratislava. It's a beautiful place. So yeah, let's go with
We
Slovakia. I don't think I'd
uh,
move. I think I go to Slovakia. I think there might be more stuff to do in Slovakia over Malta.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay. All right. Keeping it. Let's go to the other end of the scale. Now, I'm not giving you uh, Norway. It's number two. You said it has zero, so you can't have that one. Just because it's on a list doesn't mean you got it right. So, can you guess, or can you name another country in the top three? So, Norway's already gone. There's not
Uh,
too. There's ones.
I
They're
was going
not
to
too far
say
from Norway.
Norway might be the clue. So Sweden or Denmark.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Yes. Denmark is the highest CGT in Europe. Capital gains are 42%. And in Norway, they're 37.84%. Uh,
So Ireland isn't too far away. They're at 33.
well, that is correct. If you basically go down the list, okay, I'm going to give you the last pop quiz. Can you guess where we sit in the top of the pop? So
Okay.
Denmark is number one with 42%. Norway is number two with 37.84%, which is a blended rate, but let's just say it's 37%. Where do you think Ireland is?
So they can't be that far behind Norway if they're at 37. Sixth.
100%. Well done, Mike.
Sixth,
I'm
was
going
it?
to. It is sixth.
There
Yeah.
you go.
That's a great guess. And I suppose I take some comfort from that because I have walked around in a huff about how high our CGT rate is in Ireland at 33%. And I've rabbited on about it and I give out about it and I get kind of cranky about it when I hear it. Bring the Netflix discussion back in. So Denmark is number one, Norway's number two, France is number three with 34%. Finland is 34%. And we are joint fifth slash we're in fifth place, joint fifth place with Netherlands. So
Yeah.
Netherlands and Ireland are both 33%, Sweden 30%, Spain 28%, and so on. It continues all the way down. But it is, I think, as an island nation, I feel somewhat comforted by this study because I thought we were outliers, but not a bit. Denmark, Norway, France, Finland, and so on are taxing their residents even more. And I think in Ireland we have, hope I don't invite fire with this comment, I think our education system is outstanding. And I think once you're in the hospital system, it's good. So our taxes do good things. CGT play a part of those taxes. And it is imperfect, of course, but there you have it. That is CGT. But like Denmark at 42%, sure, no wonder
Yeah.
Copenhagen is beautiful. And with that kind of take home pay for a country, no wonder everyone is happy and good looking and they have Lego and Tivoli Gardens and a great planetarium and endless beer. I mean, it sounds like Dublin in the summer, non-stop over there.
Well, I wouldn't want to be in Denmark. I wouldn't want to be in Denmark in the winter, but there
No.
is an element of truth to it. Like seeing Norway and Denmark, they're wealthy Scandinavian countries who
Mm,
it's obviously not a socialist government, but it is a very left leaning government where people pay high taxes and get it back in services. And that's why a lot of these countries rate so highly on like the happiness scale, even though they can go through a month of darkness in North
yeah.
Norway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's removing stress and fear out of their citizens' lives. You know, if you know that you can get free healthcare, free education, you're going to be taken care of. I think, is it in Denmark where I think it is in Denmark where grandparents get a wage for taking care of grandchildren.
Really
Yeah, so it's like it is
nice.
it's society's built
It
for
makes perfect sense
their
if you're the
citizens.
grandparent.
100%, yeah. And like, look, this is juxtaposed with the US, which is just ultra capitalist,
Mm,
and
yeah.
for a lot of for is 100% built for a nation serving its richer people. Is that a
Mm,
fair
mm.
statement to say?
Well, it is, and I think we've seen in recent weeks and months the reflections of American sentiment when it comes to health insurance and the difficulty in getting the procedures and the drugs that you need to stay healthy in Ireland. I think there's a cap when you walk into a pharmacy. I think the most you can pay is €80, beyond which the government picks up the tab for prescribed medications per month. Um, and it's those kind of things that are in my mind when I say how good a country this is. And also when if you drop down with a heart attack in America or in most countries in Europe, possibly all countries in Europe, the way you're going to be treated varies vastly based on it. Well, in Europe, broadly speaking, how much money you've got is not part of the conversation, whereas in America, it is very much part of the treatment plan
Yeah. Right.
or indeed your coverage.
We won't delve into you know, a political
Healthcare.
conversation here, but
Yeah.
let's stick on CGT, because for an investor who's been in this game for 25 years or longer, how much of, say, would it be fair to say that's the biggest cost you've faced in your investing career?
It's fair to say it's the biggest cost I've faced in my life,
Really?
or
Okay.
at least will have. I've been buy and hold forever kind of person. But yeah, in the scheme of at the end, whatever the end is, when you carve it all up, definitely CGT is where it's going. And there's other countries make allowances for entrepreneurs relief. I mean, there's some in Ireland, but it's not outstanding. Not that I've availed of it, but it's there. Like an annual allowance of €1,270, if that's still the number, I'm pretty sure it is paltry, really, because it's been the same number for since. The reason it's €1,270 is because that's the exchange rate when the Irish pounds flipped over to the euro. It was €1.27, I think, for every pound. So we literally have had the same tax-free allowance on CGT since before the introduction of the euro. So individuals have not benefited from an increased amount of allowance on that at an annual level. But yeah, I think CGT is the one. That's why I get a little bit miffed about it. But I spent my first 17 years of my career in conventional PAYE employment, which is when I made the vast majority of my best investments because it was the ones that were made furthest back from this point. And that's why I always go on about. And I paid tax on that money, as does everybody. But now I'm at the other end of that, if you like, of those investments I made, or I'm certainly well into the journey, and CGT is looming. Now, I had read a piece many moons ago where President Kennedy in America had conducted a study on at what level is CGT optimal, because there's no question it restricts the flow of capital. And it also, the reason it restricts the flow of capital is people with hold back on decisions. I had a call from a friend of mine in California yesterday, and he said, Emmett, I have Netflix and I have Apple, and I want to sell them both to buy Tesla. And I said to him, yeah, can you do that in a tax free way? And he goes, no. And immediately we were into the conversation about, well, Tesla is going to need to grow
Yeah.
by the amount of tax you own just to get back to where you are today, which is, so that's what I mean. It restricts the flow of capital. People slow down, stop, or reverse on decisions because they realize the implication of having to pay their tax. And so JFK conducted a study at the time to see where's the optimal point where people will pay it, probably reluctantly, but don't feel hard done by. And I wish I could put my hand on this report. I looked for it last night and I couldn't find it. And to the best of my recollection, it said that for every percentage point above a CGT rate of 20%, you have the elasticity, you have a higher impact. You are more restrictive on decisions.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a point around 20% where people will, I don't want to say shrug their shoulders, but will just get on with it, just pay their tax and go find it's no problem. But when you're going up into 25, 30, or even 40% or 42% as they are in Denmark, you can be absolutely sure that people then don't uh, they avoid decision making, and
Oh,
that's a bit of a pity as well. Though on the other side, there is it slows down rash decisions. So there's it's a big equation. Nobody will really ever truly solve it because it is sponsored by things that are non-monetary, like your ability to hold and temperament and that kind of stuff.
oh, it's true. And look, it's what you say as well. I don't think anyone is arguing that you shouldn't pay tax on assets you gain a lot of money on, but 33% does feel extended, and the important thing is an awful lot of people will have paid tax on the money went into that investment.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think you
and
see.
that's where it really hurts, because you might pay 40% on, say, the 1,000 quid you invested in stock X, and then you're going to pay 33% on the other end as well on the gains you made on
Mm,
stock X. So that's where it does feel a bit like you're gouging a small bit. And what's so interesting is that 1,270 quid figure. It just shows that these laws have not been updated to reflect what's going on in Irish society at all. I don't know, we're just going on another rant. We went on a rant last week about the Irish taxation system, but if you look at like modern Ireland's business infrastructure, we're powered
mm,
by tech companies, we're powered by pharma companies, we're powered by multi-billion-dollar megacorps. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And so many of these companies, it has been a recent introduction, have brought in like employee share programs and ESOPs and whatever else. We've become, either for better or worse, not as individual stock investors and stock pickers, but we've become a country of shareholders for an awful lot of, especially people my age, around that 30, who've grown up basically from college working in tech companies or pharma companies, and they get stock options. And the tax infrastructure behind that is just not been updated whatsoever. And it's so damning that the figure 1,270 quid comes from the Irish punt to euro conversion rate. Like, when was that?
yeah.
That was in the when did the euro come in? We're asking
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me,
we're asking
but
an awful lot of questions we don't know the answer to. But
yeah, we are. Again, we've quite a few listeners shouting the answer at the radio,
I
but
know.
I'm going to say something like the year wasn't 99. Does that sound right? Come on, Google it. I'll
I
sing
am
some
sorry. Yeah.
elevator music while you're googling it.
They adopted the euro on the 1st of January 1999.
Okay,
So
there you go.
so it's 25 years that's been in place, and there's been no
Mm,
update whatsoever. And
yeah,
there's been no focus on it at all, in terms of, probably for no interest at the start. Do you know what I mean? We're never a country of stock investors. And for better or worse, we can go into like a lot of reasons why that's the case. But it
yeah,
hasn't modernized whatsoever. So in the last 10, 15 years,
no,
the amount of stock investors, even without really knowing it, do you know what I mean? People will just automatically pay into their employee share program, which whatever big business they're in, and kind of not really think about it. You're a stock investor if that's the case. And the tax law has just not kept up with the times whatsoever. So it is, yeah, it's another rant. I know
The-
we're
but
becoming
there's
specialists in
you've just
this.
reminded me of an even bigger rant that we've never had. A lot of our listeners will not have heard of what I'm about to say, and it will strike fear into their heart. But there's a tax called FET, FET. Um, I'm going to say it doesn't stand for foreign exemption tax, but it's an American tax that basically says that if you snuff it and die, and you have a stock portfolio over there, the American government will keep a large portion of it no matter what. There is no way around it. I know some lads who made a lot of money working in Apple from the early days, and they all marched into PwC to figure out how could they work around the FET tax. Now, I have numbers in my mind, but folks, please Google it if you're interested. But it's something like this: for your first 70 grand is safe. After that point, US Inc. is going to keep 30% of it, no matter what you say. Now, it's something like that. The 70% is a variable, the 30% is a variable, but it's in that rough order of magnitude. So if you worked in Acme Bricks, AI Acme Bricks, your whole life in Ireland, and you were granted $1 million worth of shares and they're sitting over in a Fidelity account in America. And if you expire and head off to the great big stock exchange in the sky way sooner than you expected, whoever's left behind is pretty much just going to have to leave 30% of that behind in America, minus 70 grand allowance. So it's another conversation. Again, it's a tax experts conversation, but it is something to be aware of in life planning. So if you're your age, Mike, where you're 20 years younger than me, you can ignore it because as probability goes, you will, you're safe to just defer a decision. But as you move through the timeline of life and your wealth goes up, there comes a point where like, I better bring it home because if I don't, when I die, Uncle Sam's keeping a large chunk of it. And I've spoken to a whole bunch of people who've been concerned about this. And I've also spoken to a whole bunch of high net worth individuals who were not aware that this is the case. So if you are in that bracket, sit down with a cup of coffee and Google FET. And if you ever find a way to legally uh, get around it, please let us know here at Stock Club. All right. So that, I mean, tax, what a fascinating and interesting subject. What I'll also say, by the way, Mike, is we all live in a bubble. So when you're in an opinion based conversation like us, our opinions draw from the interior of the bubble in which we've existed. Like you've lived a life that's very similar to my own. We're raised in the same country. We had the same, cookie cutter education. And our opinions are shaped by the same media. So we draw on our opinions are shaped by living inside that bubble. If you and I had grown up in Southern California and we were having this podcast, I'm sure over the years we would have said things and considered things and assimilated things entirely differently to the way we do now. But the reason I mention that is because my perception of wealth creation in Ireland is that it is quite new. Everybody in my family tree above a point was just poor. That's just, I mean, to put a quick word on it. If you were my four grandparents, if you go back by today's standards, they were poor. They had enough. I mean, everybody was educated in their family, everybody was fed, and everybody had clothes. But beyond that, uh, like nobody in Ireland, quote unquote, went off on fancy holidays in the 1950s. Some people did, but you know what I mean by that. So when we have a conversation about capital gains, it's a pretty new thing
Hmm.
because I can tell you our four grandparents, uh, our eight great grandparents, they didn't even know what CGT was. It mightn't have existed, but it wasn't a thing because that creation of generational wealth hadn't even happened. But whether, even if we were in Spain now, I think rural Spain in 1970s probably looked like rural Ireland in 1970s, but for the weather. What I mean is from a wealth perspective, people just dealt with their needs, did their best and got on with it. We are now in a privileged position where CGT is something that we can get miffed about. Like, so I know my privilege. I check my privilege every day. I walk around with a sense of gratitude. So I like my worries a little, and it's just an interesting conversation. I think it's worth saying that as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair enough. And in terms of wealth creation, like as in Ireland is behind these countries we compare ourselves to as well. So
Oh yeah,
maybe that's I don't want to give the government an excuse in how backward they are with their investment tax laws. But we talk about like ISAs and Roth IRAs and stuff. You know, that was from very rich countries at the time in the US and the UK and Canada, and Australia, a small bit as well. Ireland was
mm,
never at that level in the 70s. It was never needed, you know. So maybe we can be a bit optimistic and say, okay, well, these things are coming in to
yeah,
play in the future because they're a necessity now, and
yeah.
obviously there'll be a delay in between. But yeah, we're kind of banging our heads on the wall a bit, but it's a good point. It puts context to the conversation.
Bill Bryson wrote a wonderful book called America in 1927. It, it's all in the title. And he describes that year that was a transformative year in American history. Just incredible things were happening in America and around the world. But what you get from the book is how advanced the United States was compared to the rest of the world. It was a different stratosphere. So the life he describes New York City in 1927, and I can tell you it sounded like a far more advanced and enlightened place than Dublin in 1990. Right. So my point is that we look at America, when we look at stock investing, we look at America and we kind of consider things within American context, but we have to remember that our trajectory, our development curve has followed a very different path. There's, I hate using the word exponential because mathematically so often it's wrong, but the Ireland's prosperity curve was accelerated a lot from the late 90s, whereas the American prosperity curve accelerated way, 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 way before that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Right. You got anything you want to close on, or are we done with our ranting and raving?
Next week we should pitch the hell out of some fun stocks,
Yeah,
you know?
let's get away from tax conversations and just talk
Yeah.
about stocks and not worry about
Yeah.
all
Getting in
this
a huff because
pollution.
up in Norway they're at 37%, but down in France they're at 34%. It's like whatever. Just live
Yeah,
your life, enjoy it.
that's a good point. I think I might hold you to that. So next week we're just stocks only.
Okay.
All right.
Back to happy mode. All right.
All right. Thanks for
Oh,
joining me,
next
Emmett.
week we have a very interesting and really interesting interview if all goes to plan. But let's hold fire. But tune in next week, folks, because I think you'll want to hear this one.
Perfect. All right. Emmett, thank you for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later.